Okay, I really like them because I worked very hard on them, so I hope you will appreciate them as well. Let us start talking with the slides because it will be useful to have something in our view. But the real usability of what we're talking about, that will come from your questions, from the discussion. So you will be able to at least chat. And here it is. So we're talking about the cybersecurity really in general, but it's a good beginning to start talking about this from the latest, greatest hack. And when I say latest, greatest, I mean really anybody who knows about this hack will be amazed at the art of the hack. And then, of course, on the being hacked side, you will sympathize with this guy. So let us start. Let's get into the meat of the hack first. And then it's a good discussion. So here is the famous building, by now quite famous. It happens to be in Austin, Texas, not that far from me. I'm in Houston, Texas. Never saw that building, but of course, now I might come and see it. So I'll come to the timeline of the hack. But by now, I think that everybody agrees that is considered one of the most important hack of the century. This is terminology from the Wired magazine. Wired magazine gave a good overview. I actually will send everybody a very good overview if you want to go deeper. That's not my major point. For me, that is just the beginning of the conversation. So yes, historic mess is how Wired called it. And let's look at some of the things that they said here in the Wired story so that we appreciate it. So, first of all, what they say is that the largest espionage hack on record forever. That's not bad, right? Then Russia is the direct progenitor of that. We know that the blame has been put on Russia. And that started quite a while ago. So the first news, they came out in about March 2020, and by now that's a year. Now, I will also show the timeline so that we appreciate what we talk about. And that wasn't discovered by them either. It so happened that they're connected to many different organizations. And one of them said, look, it looks like your software is a spy software. And that was FireEye. So the FireEye discovered it accidentally. That's very important. We'll be talking about what can we learn from that, from the discovery of the hack itself. Okay, and once they discovered this, then I think I don't have that slide, but there I do have the slide, so I'll tell you about how they went about this. But they really did a good job. I know another few organizations. One of them is KPMG, they were called in. Another one is Microsoft. Keep in mind, this is the greatest hack ever. It involved 18,000 companies. Some of them were the top 500. Some of them were important government organizations. And essentially, the attackers had a full view into the company. Now, quite a full view. Nobody exactly knows how much of the view, but kind of being in the network, game over. That's how hackers call it. So the FireEye, they told SolarWinds. SolarWinds had to do something. We'll talk about what they did and what response they prepared. So that is what the Wired story is about. And who are the victims? I mentioned 18,000. Really, the SolarWinds has 100,000 clients, really hundreds of thousands of clients. 18,000 are those that got infected because they used that particular software that was infected. Some of them are mentioned here. The Department of State Homeland Security, I think not bad for the hackers. And recently Microsoft came up with the fact that they see the fingerprints or the imprints of 1,000 developers. That's what I meant by this picture. You can imagine a whole big army of well-paid, would assume, hackers who are coming to work daily, and they are infiltrating those companies. A lot of it was manual labor. So if you look at those 18,000, you can imagine, well, guys, which companies we're going after today, this morning. That's the meeting today. And probably even in Russia, it's remote. It's exactly when the COVID started, right? So some people say, yeah, also the great time to start because everybody is into COVID and not into security. Here are the companies that were infected. The interesting thing is that I'll tell you what the hack was about, but nobody knows. Are they out to know? The companies that are responsible, they use this wonderful phrase, to the best of our knowledge, which means we really don't know anything, but we think that we cleaned it up. And what's the proof? Well, that's because no proof, right? So that is the story. Now, that is the timeline of the hack. You see, that's when they were probably planning all of that. That's when they were preparing. Finally, TA. TA is threat actor. So whoever they are finally implanting the software. And what they're doing is this. All the software goes through the build process. All the software prepares the artifacts. Depending upon the language, it could be the exe, the executable, the Java, the jar. I think in that case that really was the executable. And um, a few things about this. So what the software was doing, I mean the attack software, this TA, the threat actor software, was hiding in the network. How did they get into the SolarWinds network? Nobody really even knows. But what they did there is once they were inside, they modified the build process. So that hack wasn't implanted into the software that was delivered by SolarWinds. No, it was implanted into the build system so that good software, something happened to it. And exactly what happened is that at the right time, the attacker software inserted an additional module, very cleverly disguised as part of the build, but really now an additional spyware module, and immediately disappeared from the view, so that this additional inserted module goes further into the production process, and it is then delivered to the target. Think of any analogy. Think of the drug that's going into the system. Think of any healthy substance that goes through the system and is delivered to the target. So in this way, you can call it poison. That was also delivered to the target. And then cover your tracks. That's one of the golden rules of doing hacks and exploits. So they covered their tracks extremely well. That's not how they were discovered. Now that the software was already infected, it was going to the clients. Whoever checks when it says your software, a legitimate software, needs an update, nobody does. And even if you did, you would never know that there is something wrong with the software. So it was injected into 18,000 good organizations as a valid update, just like Microsoft Update is delivered. And that was not discovered by any kind of analysis, but just because there was an extra login. That software would log in using a device, and that device was a hacker device. So that FireEye, that company, discovered that there was something wrong with the login. It was from a device that didn't belong to that person. So that's when they raised an alarm and started looking and finally found it. So in other words, if you call it tripwire, now if you take that lesson seriously, if you call it, let's put all kinds of tripwires in every place, well, that's how eventually we will see something we never predicted and never knew about. So, okay, we'll come back to this. But for now, here's what's going on. An employee of FireEye received an alert that was that somebody wanted to get into the VPN using their credentials but a wrong device. Well, that was very, very serious. If you verify, and that does look like, yes, it is a new device, not my device, logging in into the secure system. So they put a lot of people to investigate this before they informed. And they also looked through the code. That's what the results are. But that, the second part, is a normal reaction. What's important is that there was this lucky tripwire that started that alarm. All right, we see that. Now comes the SolarWinds. SolarWinds is hit with the bad, bad publicity. Look at their stock. It doesn't plunge to zero. No, it's good business. Hacks happen. So it plunges 25%. That's not perfect, right? But you can do something. So go ahead, look at the SolarWinds reaction, and you will find that these guys are also giving people lessons on how to do security. And nothing wrong with this. So they have a tech podcast called SolarWinds Podcast. That's where they also talk about what they are going to do. So I listened to the full podcast. It's very corporate response to me. You notice I never put all of those things on the slides. Well, you don't want to really sound bad. You don't want to upset. But here is my personal opinion. And the major point that they said is this: here's how we will do it in the future. And by the way, here's how you should do this. So learn from us for whatever it's worth. But they also gave a good perspective in the beginning. They said that uh, you all know that there is no security by obscurity anymore. I'll give you one very simple practical example. We write and deliver courses. We teach those courses. So one of our channels, they put all these instructions straight out to the web. And some of them say, and this is the username and the password that you, dear students, should use. So that's a shock, right? That is not what you put on the web. And I told them, well, if you could remove it, maybe. So the response was that, nobody knows. Google doesn't find it. Well, if you do the first search, Google does find it. The important lesson is that Google finds everything. We're not talking about dark web, but if you put anything anywhere, any port, anything, they will probably find it, probably faster than you think. Now, that is no security by obscurity. But now it's much harder because now you have bots that work on your security, trying to penetrate it all the time. And you have the state actors that can muster a workforce of thousands of people to just come to work every day and attack you. So we'll come to what it means, but the result is that what they suggest is audit your cloud trust relationships. Kind of don't trust us anymore if you can, because you have our software and that's what you're running. Document the network, okay, as if it helps, and enhance permissions rule. But that is a famous triangle. The more security you give, then the less it's usable. So the permissions rules means, well, don't let them in, right? And final, the drama still unfolds. If you look at every day or every week news, there will be some new news. So this time, an intern did it. Well, the intern used the password that he or she set, which was SolarWinds123. That's probably not a good password, but it's probably not how they got in. So leaving aside the corporate talk, the most interesting lesson to me was that today you also have it's crime that pays. You have state actors that are going after every company all the time. It's really worth it to hack something, especially because you mostly stay invisible and unpunished. Now, the hack was smarter than just that. They infected servers inside the United States. The protection against hackers is usually based on unusual IPs coming from the outside of the United States. So they overcame this. They also overcame all of the tripwires and all of the government security. We'll look at how they did it. Now, why it was such a good target? Well, because of such a good penetration. I would like to quote the CEO, the previous CEO, who said, you know, if you're something, you probably run our software. Well, that's great for the investors, but having too many customers when you're hacked plays pretty badly the other way around. So that's where things are. And there is a system called Einstein that is developed with the use of billions of dollars, but the other side also has billions of dollars. So that is a system to detect intrusions, but it mostly concentrates on foreign intrusions. And what's mostly important, it never checks SolarWinds. It never checks any of the supply chain. Supply chain is this. I am SolarWinds. I have a certificate. I get the certificate from the trusted authority. So first there is a trusted authority, which by the way has been hacked. But let's assume this one was checked. And then I am a supply chain for you. So we'll just click here to get updated. In this case, equal to get infected. Now, supply chain threats are serious stuff. You can also find out about the Azure. Azure had its own hundreds and hundreds of uh, supply chain hacks, and that's how they worked. You create a site that's very similar to some real site, like mybestparts.com, but misspelled, a couple of S's maybe, and then register as a partner. And once you register as a partner, you send the bills, and don't send very large bills, something that nobody will really want to investigate. People are busy. Looks all right. I'm saying, okay, it's not that much money, even if I'm mistaken. So that is the kind of trust that exists between a supplier, a legitimate supplier, and you can be an illegitimate supplier. All here is talking about supply chain. So that's another hack in the supply chain. All right. Now let's look at the approaches. So I gave you the reaction of the SolarWinds themselves. You can investigate any one of yours on your own, on just chat to discuss. So Apple is what's called the walled garden, and they're working very well. They are definitely a success. There is also the other side of things. So first of all, they don't protect the world; they protect their own market. So if you want to infect an application that works on the Apple Store, that's pretty hard. However, the walled garden means opaque. It means that people cannot check it. So hackers cannot get in. And once they're in, nobody can check them. So that is the beginning of the reaction that once you build an extremely good prison, well, that's a very nice place for criminals to work inside because it's protected by the prison guards, right? So that is one of the problems with this approach. There's nothing wrong. All approaches are good. The more security, the better. It's just that there's usually a loophole in every security. That's one example. Now, so what is the overall problem, I believe? And that's where I really want to share my thinking and my approaches with you guys. So the problem is that let's look at those four important points. The hackers are taking all the time. It's worth it. That's their job. All they need is to find one hole. And look, I didn't spell it right. Nevertheless, developers need to protect all of those holes, and that's much harder. Now, the hackers, they celebrate. When they got it, the Russian hackers, they use the word rules. Rules, that means went by the rules and I got it. That is what you can find by RULEEZ. Z is the sign of hacker anyway, right? But the developers, if they are secure, well, they're not even rewarded because nobody knows that they're secure other than that probably they are because, look, we haven't heard about you being insecure. Well, when you're insecure, now we need to blame you. So that's unfair. You see, that's not balanced. Now, I have a lot of security courses. There you are. That to me is not a solution, right? That's pretty dull. You can learn all of that, but between us, is that really fun to do this? Well, maybe that one is fun. Red team exercises. Maybe you learn how to jump the wire, how to watch the movies where they successful attack. That's very dangerous, and of course, nobody knows you are just a red team exercise. You might be a real criminal. They might shoot. Who knows? But other than that, it's all pretty dull. And blue team, the defenders are not that fun. So what I'm thinking about is this. Let's make it more game. At least the reward to the developers who want to be more secure will come from many sources, but there will be some other than the ire of the manager. That's not such a great reward. So here is a pseudocode of how we would approach it. We would go through well-known hacks, one of them being the tripwire. If you go back, I mean, the SolarWinds, if you go back to the reaction of SolarWinds and their podcast, one of the things they mentioned is we need to have uh, hash signatures for every build artifact. And these hash signatures are used in the CI/CD, in the continuous integration, continuous deployment tools. For example, what is the most popular one? The one that was called Hudson. So it has it, right? But it's kind of playing against, I know how I was hacked, so I will try it. So that's not enough. You need to do this. You don't want to be hacked again in this way, but you need to go through at least a few of them just to develop your style, just to develop your approach. So you have your developers, you divide them into a couple teams. You tell your boss, we're very busy, we're doing security. That's important. So he doesn't bother you. Part of you is the red team, part of you the blue. I would suggest interchanging this, changing the role. And you watch for the rewards for the blue team. The red team is rewarded once they have this proof of concept. I remember how happy I was. I was once hacking the new vulnerability of this time. And when it works, you create rules and then you see this pop up which says you've been owned. So they get the rewards. But the blue team, they should at least log the attacks. They should know that they have been attacked, but they withstood this attack. So you do this, you do leaderboard of who is the best defender, and then you go to the next and the next one. And I believe that after a few, well, Andrew Ng, he would say 20. Andrew Ng is the guy who teaches machine learning, so his number is 20 different papers. You do what the paper said. I would say that's too much, but 5, 7, I think would be a good exercise. Then you get into the game. You cannot do everything. We'll talk about what you can do, but that's how I would formulate the approach, and that's what I'm working on. So, of course, there are best practice, no doubt. You do a few things. You use the terms that the hackers use, and they don't say vulnerability. It's too long. They say the vuln. So you do the scan against known vulnerabilities. You containerize your applications because that's easier to check. Like on Google, there is an automatic check for the well-known vulnerabilities. Of course, if you're an attacker, you'll go to the marketplace where they do the zero-day exploits, something that has never been seen in the wild, and nothing helps. But the more protection you build, and that's the key point, we'll come to that again, the more protection you build, the harder it is to attack you. So you do the hash signatures for the builds, you do the CI/CD for the security. Now, my inspiration for all of that is you also become knowledgeable. Those guys, risky business, are my favorite. You might have your own, but they have an extremely energetic style, very irreverent. They don't mince their words. I'm nowhere near them. They are much sharper. So that's where you can find them. It's from Australia. It's been around for 10 years. You can also listen to all the podcasts. That what they say here is just the beginning. It doesn't really tell you the whole story. You need to listen to the podcast. So that's my source. And now I'm going to do just a few little additional things. So I want to take a pause right now and see if there are any questions. So I hope you can at least type. So if I do this, if I ask, can you type? All right. So if you can think of something to ask, that will be great. Meanwhile, I'll continue with just a few slides giving you the background of what we're talking about. So here's my program, by the way. To summarize it, let's make it fun. Let us learn security, which is a must, but let's not make it dull because nobody wants that. We want to make it exciting. One way is play it out, play that game. Now, I also wanted to show the beginning of our first security course. So here is where it came to me. This guy, his major play is being first on Jeremiah and being first on Google search for Jeremiah before the prophet Jeremiah. That's his major thing. But he also does a few hacks and he does Brazilian style karate. And he told us, he came to Houston, he was at a meetup and he showed us how you do that hack. It was very exciting. It had many repercussions on later on. So that's number one. His major rule here said, you cannot be a very cynical rule. You cannot be totally secure. Everything is has a price. Everything can be bought. However, you make it harder, and once you make it harder, then they go to the other guy and they hack the other guy. So you are not the next SolarWinds. Somebody else is. Well, you cannot do any better. And by the way, he runs security companies so that if you pay that kind of must-have protection, then that works. So there is also an interesting resource, another guy, the other side. That's how they work. Uh, you can find it on YouTube. You can ask me how to find it. But he talks about very practical ways of being a hacker for whatever reason. His reason is freedom fighting, but of course, there are many different reasons. That is one of the best resources here. And then, well, practically, here is the rule, which I intentionally say that's the dull rule. The dull part, that's what you do. What I'm suggesting is just making it a bit more fun, but you'll have to do it. All of those things are valid, they are important, but that's what you are up against. You are against very specialized marketplaces. You buy services, you buy hacking services, you pay them through escrow services so that if you don't pay, you don't get the goods. Also, Bitcoins are accepted everywhere in these markets. You can even buy vouchers and gift cards. So that's the story. Now, FBI thinks many of those activities are really illegal. Hacking is illegal in the first place. There are definitely attempts to stop the good guys from that because bad guys don't quite listen. But the good guys do get maybe penalized when they do the wrong things, like possessions of the hacking tools by itself in Germany is prohibited. So yes, FBI is in there, but there's only one guy per case, or maybe a few guys per case. So it's better to be on the defensive side and not get hacked, all right? And the way they work is by becoming a specialist in one area, herding the botnets, or maybe credit card marketplace, or maybe a very specific hack. So to match up, you really need to at least have the fun that they're having and begin specializing. That would be my approach. So let me check questions and answers. Let me check on the chats. All right. So you say, sorry, stopped to Google risky biz. Yeah, that's very exciting, very interesting, if that's what you meant. And that is true. Everybody goes for the low-hanging fruit, but then you can extend your analysis. You can talk about economics. Once you make it not economical, it's not that they go for the low-hanging fruit, because you might invite more people, you a hacker, and maybe make it automated even more. So it's not only that, but once you make it uneconomical, that's when it is likely that they won't do it, because it's all business. Now, I also see questions and answers here. But for some reason, even though I click on that, I don't see those questions and answers. So I'll stop the chat. I don't know how to see those questions and answers. I can try to stop sharing, because I don't need to share here anymore anyway. There you are. And I see questions and answers. And question number one from Mike. If 18,000 clients were attacked by SolarWinds DevOps chain being hacked, why are there no zilch reports of SolarWinds being exploited as a major company agency? There have not been a discussion about SolarWinds hack Occupy supply chain has been exploited. Mike, it has. I can show you and send you just answer to the announcement of the webinar, and let's start this discussion. I'll give you all of those reports. How vulnerable are open source projects? Well, that's a very good discussion scene. How vulnerable are open source projects? My personal opinion, usually they are less vulnerable because they're checked more often by many more people. But you see, the question is broader. If I can hack the build, then it doesn't matter that something there was open source or what wasn't. What is your target market for your course? Okay, that's what I'm asking you guys. I think that what's our offer? We are a training company. We have a great interest in security. We are mostly developers. I feel this is what's missing. I feel that you can find courses for, if you are a hacker, how do you attack? Definitely so. If you are an administrator, how do you defend? But I have a good friend who is a hacker at a consulting company. So he says, when he tells programs, guys, you've been hacked, well, first of all, they're unhappy, and secondly, they don't know what to do. So that is my market. My market are the people who are on the defense, who are developers. The next question is, I hope that all these questions answer what you're asking. So how can small and medium-sized companies protect their sites? That is a sad story. I think the basic answer is that you need to use some security protecting company. And, that's the same Jeremiah Grossman. He mentioned there are lots of mom and pop shop. And if you tell them, you've been hacked, they will say, you are the hacker who is saying this, so we don't believe you. So most of the world, according to him, is already hacked anyway. But some people can pay his white hat security. Well, he left white hat security. He's doing something else. But there are security companies. By the way, one of the answers on the SolarWinds security podcast was that hire a security company before you get hacked, and so that when the time comes, you don't have to go through the negotiations of having them. In other words, throw a lot of money before you even need it, so that you will pay more money when it comes to that. And it sounded like that's from a former security consultant, which of course it was. So yes, money helps. How do small and medium-sized biz companies help? Well, I think by now you can't ignore it. You cannot say that's something I don't care about. But if you just keep being current, that's an interesting area anyway. People like cops and robbers. So if you just keep yourself informed, I think that is a good thing. By the way, we're starting a security newsletter. And so if you are on our list anyway, which probably you are, that's how you came here, you'll see that security newsletter. I wanted to show you. Let me show the screen again. And here is this. I need to go to the desktop. So that's the kind of little roundup that we'll be sending out. Here are the interesting things. There will be a summary. You will be able to see what it is about, and then why should you even click on that link and read it, and that kind of thing every week. I think that helps. Then gradually you will know very well who is uh, creditable. Krebs. Krebs is one famous guy. Krebs on security. By the way, the name of the guy who is now on the board to defend SolarWinds is Krebs. It's not that same Krebs. It's a different Krebs. So you'll know who is who, and you will be a little bit current. And then that's something to talk to your friends about. So I would definitely recommend being a little bit current. Whatever your favorite way is it, podcast, is it a quick read, and more questions. The estimated casualties from the SolarWind hack. Well, let's say the Russians know everything about American defense. How would you estimate that casualty? Right. So some of them you cannot just put it in money. If you look at how much did the SolarWind price drop, 25%. So it's not that terrible. Uh, Now I don't mind hearing about that market. I think that's what we're talking about. Machine learning. So supposedly machine learning would be one of the biggest users, and supposedly the AI should be used there, but I have not seen it. Have not seen it. So small companies do not have large. So kind of be reasonable. Whatever you can do, that's all. If you don't have your own developers, then at least start with your own education, and the education, a little education, will go a long way, right? And just listen to those podcasts, or just reading a little bit on security, but in a regular way. Just recently, Windows 7 controls uh, water supply somewhere in Florida. There is a hack. People control the mouse, and they are releasing some kind of bad stuff into the water. Unpleasant, right? Somehow the operator sees that mouse, says, "That's not me. That's not my mouse," so they stop it. But that kind of thing emphasizes what you are saying, Richard, that legacy installed equipment, nobody wants to support it. Well, sorry, it's like there is a hole in this bank that everybody knows about, and that's how I usually get paid. All right. I think that's a very interesting discussion. We can't talk about absolutely everything here. I see a few more questions and answers here, but I think I basically answered all of them. So I think that's just an ongoing discussion. That's the world that we live in. And just as, they like to talk about Bitcoin, and they say that, oh, Bitcoin it costs money just to run. True, but security also costs money just to run. So I would start with education, your own personal education. Then that will actually take you pretty far. And we'll be sending out newsletters. You will be able to reply there or read. So I hope I said everything that I wanted to say. My estimate is that's what I really wanted to convey. So it seems like, yes, it's an interesting topic. Yes, it is something fun for people. That my own journey started about 10 years ago, when I started uh, doing those risky biz podcasts, or anything else is good, but they've been around for 10 years. So anything of that sort will probably be fun. What I can promise you is that that's an exciting area. It's not just another machine learning model. We teach mostly AI, but we're going to teach more security. What I showed you was the beginning of one of our courses. So, well, probably what I can promise is that it's an interesting thing to learn, and you'll have a lot of things that you'd like to learn about, and some excitement in the middle. So thank you, everybody. We will be sending the follow-up. We will send you these slides. We will send you the recording. So if you want to listen to that again for any reason, then you're very welcome. And I just wanted to thank you very much, because I got what I wanted. I wanted to see if people are interested in that something in any way that you want to discuss it. And seems like, yes, that's an exciting area to talk about. Okay, so I'll be saying goodbye for now. I'll give you your quarter hour back. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody who came. And send us questions. Continue that conversation. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Goodbye.